Hi everyone, hope you are all doing great. Have you ever wondered how the modern of international system came to be? What fundamental changes reshape global politics and the way states interact with each other? Well, today we will explore the pivotal concept known as Westphalian system, a transformative paradigm that laid the groundwork for the contemporary international order. In the field of international relations, terms such as the Westphalian system, Westphalian model, Westphalian paradigm, or Westphalian regime are frequently employed by scholars as shortened to describe a significant transformative in the structure of international affairs. This transformation is generally understood to have occurred in the 17th century, marking a departure from the previously dominated notion of a Christian's commonwealth governed by universal institutions, namely the papacy and the imperial authority. Instead, it heralded the emergence of an international order, primarily composed of independent sovereign states. These states exercise unrestrained authority within their territorial boundaries and engaged in mutual relations based on principles of equality and self-interest. This shift represented a fundamental recognition of international community form of hierarchical system, where authority was recognized above states to a more horizontal arrangements. In this new framework, multiple territorial defined autonomous entities coexist, governed by a novel form of a law that operates between states, rather than above them. This paradigm underscores the importance of sovereignty, sovereign equality, and the recognition of a state as the primary actors in international relations, marking a pivotal moment in the development of a modern international system. The origins of the concepts are closely linked to 1948 article by Leo Gross, who examined the Peace of Westphalia 1648 as the beginning of a new era in international relations and the foundation of modern international law. Gross argued that the treaty's significance lay not just in its text, but in the broader shifts it represents. First, the secularization of international law. Two, the inclusion of both republican and monarchical states on equal footing. And three, the moving away from hierarchical societal structures toward a system where states are sovereign, equal, and independent. His analysis helped popularize the idea of a Westphalian order within the Anglo-American international relations community and served as a basis for state-centric analysis, especially among our friends, the realists. Recently, the concept has been used to interpret global trends, such as the rise of non-state actors, limits on sovereignty for human rights, and supranational institutions, development that challenge the traditional Westphalian paradigm and raise questions about its continued relevance. Now, let me give you a short historical background about Westphalian system. It originated in 1648 from the Peace of Westphalia, as we have said, considered to be the foundational framework of the modern international relations, where established the sovereign nation states as the primary actor, prioritizing the territorial integrity, exclusive domestic jurisdiction, and the legal equality of states free from external religious or political interference. The system emerged from a series of peace treaties signed in Westphalia towns of Munster and Osnabrück, which ended both the 30 Years' War and 80 Years' War. Now, the 30 Years' War was a devastating conflict primarily fought in Central Europe, involving many of the great European powers of the time. It started as a religious struggle between the Protestants and Catholic states within the Holy Roman Empire, but gradually expanded into a broader political and territorial conflict. The war was marked by brutal battles, widespread destruction, and significant loss of life, including civilian casualties. It also involved major powers like France, Sweden, Spain, and Australia, each pursuing their own territorial and political ambitions. The war concluded with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, which significantly reshaped the political map of Europe. It recognized the sovereignty of numerous German princes, diminished the Holy Roman Empire's authority, and granted religious tolerance to Protestants and Catholics alike. The peace treaties laid the groundwork for the modern system of a sovereign state by emphasizing territorial sovereignty and non-intervention. Nice. Now, what about the 80 Years' Wars, where it was protracted conflict between the Dutch Republic and Spain? It began as a rebellion by the Dutch province against the Spain rule and religious persecutions during the 16th centuries. Over several decades, the Dutch fought for independence with a notable military campaigns and alliances forming over time. This war ended with the Treaty of Munster in 1648, which was part of the broader Peace of Westphalia negotiations. The treaty officially recognized the independence of the Dutch Republic, making it a sovereign state. This was a significant moment in the development of international law and the concept of sovereignty, as it marked one of the first formal negotiations of the breakaway of nation state by a major European power. Okay, having said that, now let's move on to take a look to the main elements of Westphalian system in international relations. The Westphalian system, as it was interpreted by scholars of international relations and international law, is characterized by several foundational elements that have shaped the modern international order. First one, the decline of medieval universal institutions. As we said, a pivotal change initiated by the Westphalian system was the weakening of medieval universal institutions, such as papacy and the Holy Roman Empire. Historically, these entities sought to govern both spiritual and secular realms, asserting hierarchical authority over Christendom. This Peace of Westphalia in 1648 marked a decisive shift by recognizing the sovereignty of the existing states like France, Sweden, and enabling new ones such as Netherlands and the Switzerland to emerge. This settlement effectively ended the Holy Roman Empire's control over its constituent units and excluded the Pope from the negotiations, thereby dismantling the notion of a unified Christian commonwealth. Second one, the emergence of sovereign states as being actors. As we have said also, following the Westphalia, the international system was centered around independent sovereign states. These states, supported by increasingly centralized administrative structure, exercised control within their own territories and engaged in diplomacy to define their legal relations. The survival of the system depended on respecting the autonomy of weaker states, leading to the development of the balance of power concept, a mechanism to prevent the dominance by a single state and ensure stability within the international order that they have created. Third one, legal principles and foundation for the modern international law. Scholars have often viewed the Westphalian system as the foundation for key legal principles that continue to underpin the contemporary international law. This includes 4 basic elements. Put that in your mind and never forget it. First one, equality of states. Recognizing states as equal entities, which fosters non-discrimination. Second one, sovereignty and territorial integrity. States possess exclusive authority within their own borders. Third one, non-intervention. States should never interfere to the domestic affairs of the others. Fourth one, consent-based law, which means that international obligations arise from state consent, whether through treaties or customary practices. This framework promotes a horizontal, non-hierarchical international society where states engage on equal terms, emphasizing voluntary agreements as the primary source of international law. Now, the fourth element is recognition of state sovereignty as the central achievement for them. This is considered to be one of the most significant outcomes of Westphalian treaties, which was the affirmation of state sovereignty. So, guys, the affirmation of 1648 was, "We are sovereign state." This was the affirmation, placing territorial and political authority firmly within the control of nation states. This principle underpins the legal and political understanding that no external authority should interfere in your domestic governance, reinforcing the core concept of territorial jurisdiction and non-intervention. Well, these principles remain central to the modern international legal order and inform the development of jurisdictional rules and regulation of the state behavior. Okay, I know. We will have a long talk about that, believe me. I am sure that you have noticed that we are discussing here a system which was established over 300 years. I mean, no state is feeling a little bit old and bored here. Well, the truth is yes. Not only some states felt old and bored, but some people on this earth also felt a little bit, too much excluded. As you know, Westphalian system is a European one. It's a Eurocentric kind of system, which was established actually to solve their own problems. Well, your problems are different from my problems, so how should I take your medicine to solve my own problems and to cure myself, what about Asia? What about Eurasia? What about Africa? What about the countries like Russia, India, China, what about the Islamic world, Middle East? They are humans also, and they need to put their own way to look the world and how they should organize themselves. Well, these humans actually were very nice and open-minded people. And they say, okay, let me take a look to this menu. It looks very nice. We have here a sovereign, independent, and equal states with a territorial integrity. This is amazing. Oh, zero intervention in my domestic affairs. Interesting. And they will also take my permission also or consent for the international obligation that I'm going to make. Sounds very nice and good. Okay, I'm definitely going to buy this one. And so the world adopted that till something happened. Globalization happened, actually. Globalization was a challenge for Westphalian order because globalization has profoundly transformed international relations, eroding the traditional Westphalian, emphasizing on the sovereign, independent states. The unprecedented levels of the economic, technological and information interdependence mean that states are no longer isolated actors solely responsible for their own internal affairs, Transnational issues such as climate change, pandemic, we all still remember COVID, cybersecurity, transcends borders, all these demanding multilateral cooperation that often conflicts with the Westphalian principles of non-intervention. This interconnectedness complicates the notion of absolute sovereignty. Well, there is no absolute sovereignty. Let's be realistic. As states increasingly cede authority to supranational institutions or rely on collective actions, challenging the traditional Westphalian paradigm. Yes, it happened and the human developed. Now, the second challenge is a humanitarian intervention and erosion of non-intervention norms. Yes, the rise of humanitarian interventions aimed to preventing or stopping mass atrocities represents a fundamental challenge to Westphalian principle of non-intervention, as we have seen. Under the guise of protecting human rights, states and international organizations have intervened militarily in sovereign states, often without explicit consent. While such actions are sometimes justified under the responsibility to protect R2P doctrine, they blur the boundaries of sovereignty and the question whether the Westphalian order remains valid in an era where moral imperatives and international norms increasingly influence state behavior. For example, NATO intervention military in Kosovo in 1999 bypassed UN Security Council approval. NATO-led coalition intervention in Libya in 2011 to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. The US intervention in Vietnam in 1955 till 1975 challenged also the norms of non-intervention. The invasion of Iraq in 2003 also was a violation of the principle of non-intervention, sparking international controversy. Third one, regime change policies. We all have heard about promoting democracy, regime change. Yes, it has become a prominent feature of the modern geopolitics, often driven by external powers seeking to shape political landscape in line with universal values. These actions challenge the Westphalian notion of sovereignty by interfering in domestic affairs under the argument of fostering stability of the human rights. Well, such interventions raise critical questions about the legitimacy of external influence and whether sovereignty can or should actually be conditional, especially when it is used to justify unilateral or multilateral actions that reshape domestic political systems. For example, regime change in Guatemala in 1954, CIA did it. Regime change in Chile in 1973, also US did it. Invasion and regime change in Iraq 2003, yes, US did it. Regime change in Syria 2024, US did it. Donald Trump said it, not me.
I want to spend a lot of time, but all I can say is that the president of Syria, who I essentially put there, is doing a phenomenal job. He's a rough guy.
And on January 2026, the United States conducted a covert military operation in Venezuela, capturing, kidnapping his president and his wife. So I told you we are developing, but I think in violating the system, I guess. Well, it doesn't matter. The most important thing that we are evolving. And this is the fourth element, which is evolving statehood and rise of non-state actors, individuals, or entities. The proliferations of non-state actors, such as multinational cooperation, terrorist groups, international organizations, further complicates the Westphalian framework. These actors often operate across borders, influence state policies, and sometimes bypass traditional state authority. For example, the armed group that affiliated to Iran in Middle East as well, like Hezbollah, like Houthi, like in Iraq, etc. Look at the Israeli lobby in USA, the IPAC. All these are, everyone you feel that actively working to affect this beautiful woman called sovereign state. So this shifts the questions, the primacy of the state as a solo actor in international relations, and suggests that Westphalian model rooted in state sovereignty and as a solo actor in international relations is now so solo. Maybe by increasingly outdated in explaining the modern global interactions. Now, do you want me to make this conversation more spicy? Okay, let's talk about the impact of Donald Trump's policies on Westphalian system. Nice. Well, Trump's policies characterized by protectionism, unilateralism, and the skepticism of multilateral institutions have significant implications on globalization. And if his policies have had negative impact on globalization, it might mean that it had a positive impact on Westphalian system, as the globalization has undermined the Westphalian system, as we have discussed before, right? Well, I wish that thing was very simple, but no, politics is more complicated. Let's look at that. While globalization has challenged the Westphalian system by promoting cross-border interconnectedness and multilateral cooperations, which can dilute traditional notions of sovereignty and non-intervention, Trump's policies, marked by protectionism, unilateralism, and skepticism towards multinational institutions, have had constant impact on the dynamics between globalization and Westphalian system. Trump policies, which have negatively impacted globalization, might be seen as having a slight positive or at least a less negative impact on Westphalian system. This is because his emphasis on the national sovereignty, America First policy, unilateral actions, and economic nationalism could be interpreted as reinforcing the core principles of absolute sovereignty and non-intervention that underpin the Westphalian system. In a sense, it might look at that the Trump policies have prolonged the life of Westphalian system by promoting a more inward-looking, protectionist and utilitarian approach, which contrasts with the multilateral and interconnected nature of a globalization. However, his foreign policy, such as the intervention in Venezuela, kidnapping its president and his wife, repeated demands to incorporate Greenland and sometimes Canada into the United States, the war on Iran not only undermined the Westphalian system and the international order, but effectively dismantled it. Now, after saying all that, do you think that our friend Westphalian order has a future? Well, given these challenges, the question always arises: is the Westphalian order still valid? Well, many scholars argue that it's increasingly strained, perhaps even outdated, in a world where sovereignty is more pauses and interwhelmed. While the core principles such as sovereignty and non-intervention remain foundational, their application must adapt it to contemporary realities. This may involve reconceptualization sovereignty, not as absolute, but as conditional, contingent upon responsibilities and the collective interests, not only the international community, but as well as the regional interest as well. As we reflect on the legacy of Westphalian system, it becomes clear that while its principles laid the foundation for the modern of international order, the world has changed dramatically since the 17th century. Today, there are continually challenging the very notion of sovereignty and the non-intervention that once seemed absolute, as If we are in some parts of the world going back to even pre-Westphalian system, I don't know, look around you. The question we face is whether the Westphalian paradigm remains relevant or if it needs to evolve to address the complexities of our current world, where the international system is pivoting toward a multipolar system and at the regional level, multilateral players. There is an old system is deteriorating while a new one is arising. Where does the state actually located? The future of international relations depends on our ability to strike a balance, respecting national sovereignty while recognizing the imperative of the national interest, global cooperation, non-biased human rights, collective security, and regional security. As scholars and practitioners of the international relations, I believe it's essential that we always critically examine whether the old order can adapt for a new paradigm, okay? One that better reflects the reality of the 21st century, the geopolitics change. Because in the end, understanding this, the strength and the limitations of Westphalian system is the really key to shape more just, effective, and resilient international order for generation to come. That was our conversation for today. Thanks for watching. See you next time.